Here is the passage from Romans 6:13-18 in the New International Version (NIV), followed by an explanation of each verse. Romans 6:13-18 NIV, verse 13. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to Him as an instrument of righteousness. Explanation: this verse encourages believers not to use their bodies or minds for sinful purposes, but instead to dedicate themselves to God. The imagery of moving from death to life symbolizes the transformation that occurs through faith in Jesus Christ, urging a life of righteousness. Verse 14, for sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace. Explanation: here, Paul explains that believers are no longer under the old covenant of the law, which brought awareness of sin, but not the power to overcome it. Instead, they are under the new covenant of grace, through Jesus, which empowers them to live righteously. Verse 15, what then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? By no means. Explanation: anticipating a possible misunderstanding, Paul clarifies that living under grace is not a license to sin. Even though believers are not under the strict legalism of the law, they are still called to live holy lives. Verse 16, don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness? Explanation: this verse illustrates the concept of spiritual slavery. Paul argues that a person is a slave to whatever they obey, whether it's sin, leading to spiritual death, or obedience to God, leading to righteousness. Verse 17, but thanks be to God that, though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. Explanation: Paul expresses gratitude that believers, who were once slaves to sin, have now wholeheartedly embraced the teachings of the gospel, indicating a fundamental change in their allegiance and behavior. Verse 18, you have been set free from sin, and have become slaves to righteousness. Explanation: this final verse in the passage summarizes the transformation of believers. They have been liberated from the bondage of sin, and have become devoted to living righteously, key aspect of the Christian faith. In summary, Romans 6:13-18 speaks to the heart of Christian living, emphasizing the transformation from a life enslaved by sin to one committed to righteousness through the grace of God in Jesus Christ. It underscores the responsibility of believers to live in a way that honors this transformation.